So I'd now like to welcome Adam Gray, who is one of the major sponsors of our event and a member of our Adaptation Framework Steering Committee. Adam is the Environment Director of SA at the Local Government Association, and he will be sharing with you what the local government sector has been doing to lead adaptation in climate change. Thank you, Adam.
Thanks, Roland, for the introduction, and welcome everybody. It's great to see so many faces here today, and I think that's a testament to the work that Brenton and Roland and the team at the Sustainability Climate Change Division in putting this together and promoting it. It's nice to see a few faces from some of the early day forums that we've run where not so many faces are present. I had to laugh when I saw the USB stick. I was thinking of some emails that we could have put on there from East Anglia or something like that. And, you know, front page of the advertisement might have been something sending out secret files on a USB stick at a climber forum. But I thought that was an interesting move, Roland. My presentation today is going to span over a few years of work that the Local Government Association has been undertaking in partnership with a whole host of different stakeholders, including the state and federal government. So please, I'll apologise if, on first instance, if I don't recognise everybody. I'm going to probably try not to recognise too many because that's the bulk of my presentation. But secondly, because this has spanned a few years, a number of you may have seen me present before on some of this material. So, but for those of you that haven't had the pleasure of seeing me present on this stuff before, you should really enjoy it. And I would normally be presenting in a format that looks a little bit like Ben Peacock does on his flyer there, but Roland hasn't given me enough space for my usual cart bill, so I think we'll pass on that. Today I really want to cover off just a couple of slides, and if I had better PowerPoint presentation skills, some of this stuff might have whizzed around and flashed and what have you, but alas, I don't. So we'll work through a number of years of work. I recognise that some of this material is going to be presented later on today by different speakers, so I won't go into too much detail. I'll be around for the bulk of the day. If some of the stuff I cover in the next half an hour you'd like to know about in more detail. But I was thinking, where do we start this presentation? And the obvious place to start would be the beginning, but it was really hard for me to pin down what the beginning was, because the local government sector has actually been very active in what you could loosely call adaptation planning for a lot of years, decades in fact, because councils manage long-term assets, they manage a whole host of issues with the community, and they do so in an environment that has natural variability and is changing. What we have now is, and pointed out by Darren, is change that is accelerating, and we have now put some of the work that we're doing on what you could call adaptation. We could put climate change in front of that. And so the body of work we're doing at the moment is specifically focused on the likely impacts of climate change. Let's start with the LGA climate change strategy up there by the yellow arrow. In around 2008, it was recognised by the local government sector that climate change warranted a peak body strategy, and so during a whole host of processes of consultation with our member councils, 68 councils in South Australia, the bulk of which are regional councils, and a number of those regional councils are small. We developed a climate change strategy, and that strategy had three pillars effectively of work to be undertaken under adaptation, work to be undertaken under mitigation, so reducing our greenhouse gases, and the role of local government as leaders in the community, and as one of the three tiers of government with the state and the federal governments. During that time, we had the discussions with the state government, and the South Australian Climate Change Act enables the state to enter into sector agreements with key sectors and identify areas of work that could and can be undertaken collaboratively. And so the Local Government Association and our member councils were, I think, the second cat off the rank in South Australia to sign a sector agreement with the state government. That sector agreement outlined, again, a whole host of work under the 3 pillars, but it certainly had a strong focus on adaptation, because local government, for want of a better word, is seen as the sector of government that's closest to the people, has a very strong position in community-driven adaptation planning. And so we had at the time, the former Premier Mike Rand had a very strong focus on mitigation, and councils had already had long-standing experiences in working with their communities to reduce their environmental footprint, including greenhouse gases. So there was a strong focus for adaptation planning under the sector agreement. One of the key activities that the Local Government Association included in the sector agreement was the process by which we did a risk assessment with every council in South Australia, and that was undertaken by the South Australian Local Government Association's Mutual Liability Scheme, our insurer, and involved workshops in every council in the state, bar a couple, and was probably one of the first opportunities for the peak body, for the sector, to actually come out into councils and present what the latest climate science was telling us, analyse what that climate science meant for particular regions, and then talk to councils about what their key risks to those climate impacts were likely to be. The project was focused very much on council to council. It was looking at council's business. It looked at things like planning and development. It looked at emergency management responses. It looked at councils as owners and managers of significant assets, community assets, and also again leaders within the community and close linkages with the community. That project has been a fairly substantial foundation for the work that we've progressed since then. It's given us a fantastic overview of the sector, and it gives us strong research in which to represent what climate change means for local government in South Australia to the other tiers of government, but also set a work program for local government associations to target key areas of risk for our sector. One of those key areas of risk is local government as key holders of assets, and local government sector in Australia, 560 odd councils, manage approximately $300 billion worth of assets, and it takes up a fair chunk of our time and effort in local government in managing those assets. Climate impacts obviously are going to have an impact on those assets if we start to experience longer, hotter heat waves, if we experience sea level rise, which impacts on coastal areas, if we have changes in rainfall frequency and the size of rainfall events. However, when we started to talk to councils about how we incorporate that into their strategic, operational and business planning processes, there was really no mechanisms in which to enable councils to incorporate financial impacts into long-term asset financial management plans. So the LGA applied to the National Climate Change Adaptation Research Facility through a program referred to as Settlements and Infrastructure Program, and over the last few years we've been working on developing a tool which was aimed at identifying the financial impacts of climate change on our road assets. So we're looking at spray sealed, hot mix and unsealed roads. One of the benefits of that tool is that it really starts to put a frame around how do we interpret the impacts of climate change into existing planning processes. How do we partner with the various sectors in which to better understand this work, and how do we partner with agencies, and in this case the Institute of Public Works and Engineers, to find a home for this work so that it has longevity going forward, it's able to be updated as needed, and it's picked up in processes that local government is already familiar with and already use. And so that project has recently been finished. There will be a poster display later on today if you want to have a look at that in a little bit more detail. And I think Jackie Bolston is going to be covering off on a little bit of our work of that project in her presentation later. We also identified that managing our assets and also managing our coastal environment is going to be a significant challenge. sea level rise, as Darren pointed out, has been with us for some time and it's accelerating. This Australian community has a strong affinity for the coast. We build very close to the coast. We love our coastal environments. Over 80% of our population is within a few kilometres of the coast. And that development pressure is going to be exacerbated by increasing sea level rise. To assist our local government sector in working through some of the issues associated with coastal environment, we attracted a Department of Climate Change funding through the Coastal Adaptation Decision Pathways project. The aim of our project was basically to say to councils there's a whole host of different ways in which you can respond to the pressure of increasing sea level rise. You might choose to introduce plans for coastal retreat. You might introduce plans to protect your assets with seawalls or levee banks. You might choose options to accommodate the increase. So, for example, you might talk to the community about elevating their homes. There's a whole host of opportunities, but councils really don't have a lot of tools or resources to be able to help analyse what the different options mean over a long period of time in a financial sense. And so the LGA has partnered again with a whole host of stakeholders and developed a tool which is hopefully going to be released by the Federal Minister for Climate Change before too long, with 15 other national projects looking at coastal decision pathways. And that tool is going to be available to our councils to help them with that decision-making process. We also looked at trees. The droughts that Darren referred to were long and sustained and had a fair impact on our urban environment, and in particular some of the large trees that we have. And some of you might remember that we had some very unfortunate incidences with limb failure, one in particular in Burnside where we had some serious injuries and some fatalities. Local government's management of trees as an asset was defined well by some councils and not so well by others, and so the Local Government Association instigated an inquiry to look at what our management of our tree stock was like and what we could do to better manage changes in our climate and a whole host of other governance arrangements. The tree inquiry has been finished and there'll be a whole host of resources available to councils, but I guess it's one area of where the climate impacts are showing trends now that we start to need to apply those trends into the future and start to look at the way we manage our resources in a different light, putting a climate lens over that. We're also looking at disaster response, and so our mutual liability scheme is working with councils, and work's also being undergone with the state in a separate process to look at the way in which regions respond to extreme events. Extreme events are difficult to manage, and they are difficult to predict in a climate science sense, but we know that the likelihood of some extreme events, such as bushfire, are likely to become more prevalent in the future.